Pastor Garrett,
Yes, Pastor Jermaine.
I'm super excited about who we're talking about today.
It's going to be really hard for me. I guarantee you at one point in this episode, I'm going to say Moses instead of Matthew.
We're still back on Moses.
Well, you know, the M's and
Yes,
a giant figure in biblical history.
That is a struggle.
It's going to be, so those that are listening, it's going to happen at least once. That's my prophecy for this episode.
You just did it. And now you planted that bug in my mind.
It's going to happen. And this was self-fulfilled. I don't know about you. We'll see what happens.
Well, we are talking about Matthew today, not Moses.
Not Moses, Matthew.
We have transitioned from the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Yes.
And I love the fact that we're talking about Matthew because, like many people, we have similarities with the apostles, the disciples that Jesus chose. But one of the things that is important for us to mention for our listeners is this is, we kind of wrestled with whether doing this as a part one, part two, because we're talking about two individuals in the next two episodes. We're talking about Matthew, and then we're talking about who else?
Yeah, it's Simon the Zealot, right? Which we know very little about from the biblical narrative. We know quite a bit about Matthew, and so we thought about lumping them in together, but we decided against that because it would have kind of got us off our flow and all that. So we're going to talk about Matthew, but keep Simon in your mind for later.
Yes, because these are two individuals, perhaps with two separate backgrounds. But they are two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. They're right there. And not to be confused with Simon Peter, Simon the Zealot, which
that's
are
a
two
totally
separate
different
disciples.
Simon.
Yep, exactly. So we're here with Matthew today, and there's a sentence that we kind of want to start this episode with, yeah?
Yeah, and we will start the next episode with the sentence. So here it goes. The next two episodes, we will be discussing two individuals with two different philosophies from two separate backgrounds, but still are two sides of the same coin.
And that's kind of a play on words.
It is.
If you know the story of Matthew, we kind of know Matthew not just by the book that he wrote or is credited to have written, but we know him solely based upon his occupation.
His profession, which means he was a tax collector.
Yes.
And we did this play on words because he would have handled coins quite a bit.
Yep, and he would have been pretty educated, not just in finance, but just the makeup, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but just the makeup of his book that he wrote.
Yes.
Very technical in the writing.
Yeah.
The language that he used was very skilled.
Yeah.
This was not just your average person writing something down.
No. I mean, you could see that he might have been a very skilled business owner.
Yeah.
Perhaps on par with Zacchaeus, which we might discuss briefly here.
Yep.
But Matthew was a smart dude.
Yeah.
There's no way Matthew was, just a run-of-the-mill regular guy. So you can tell, like, just his writing style. We'll dive into that briefly, but I think the question we must ask is, well, where do we begin with his life?
It's tough because, I mean, with some of the disciples that we don't know where this is in the order, but we kind of start at the call of where he is. But Matthew's book, if you're going to this synoptic gospel of Matthew, he doesn't introduced in his narrative until chapter 9.
Yeah.
He does a really good job of going through the birth of Jesus, talking about the lineage, which is very important to him, talking about the origins of Jesus. One of Matthew's most important points of his gospel is to prove to his contemporaries that Jesus is Messiah.
I called Matthew's gospel the gospel where the writer hides himself.
That's a fact.
Yeah, because Matthew's name is mentioned twice in the Gospel of Matthew.
It's true. Matthew, it's mentioned 2 times when Jesus calls him in Matthew 9, and we'll read that. And then he's also listed by name again
Matthew
in the
10,
list.
3.
Yeah, just in the
Matthew
list.
10, yeah.
And he's referenced multiple other times in Matthew, but he kind of just calls himself the tax collector. He hides himself, as you said, in the narrative. Why do you think he does that?
Well, I think because he wants to highlight Jesus.
Okay.
Right? Which increases. I think this is a very powerful tool that he uses in the book of Matthew. When the author himself is hidden and the focus is on Jesus, Jesus gets the prominent position, which highlights the value of Christ. In other words, to me, Matthew found the pearl of great price.
Yeah.
Or the coin of great price, if we want to use that word again. So I think that's why he hides himself. He wants Jesus to be clearly seen. The brother does not want to be in the way.
Yeah, I'm really into right now. He's a Christian author. He wrote novels back in the like Russian Siberia age, and his name's Dostoevsky. He's pretty well known in literature circles. I know. I've been reading some of his books recently, and one of the ones that he's known really well for is called White Knight, and it's only like 100 pages, which is unusual for Dostoevsky. But what you don't realize until the end of the book, you have the main protagonist in the story, and then you have this woman that he's falling in love with. And I won't give it away for you, but he mentions her name hundreds of times in this 100-page book. And then at the end, you realize that the main protagonist is not named at all.
In the entire book.
Entire book, he's
Wow.
not mentioned. You never know his name.
Wow.
And so it kind of reminds me of Matthew here, like you said. The whole point, even though he's one of the main protagonists in the book and you're seeing it from his eyes, he's very sincere and humble in the writing of his gospel.
Yeah, which is antithetical to his profession. You know, like you don't expect that from
No.
a tax collector. But I think the impact of Jesus on the life of an individual, it's so transformative that when they write, when they sing, when they preach, we could even go that far, you begin to see that the person, someone who's truly converted in Christ, self doesn't matter.
Yeah, and we see that in the details, and we'll see this. We should probably jump into Matthew 9, but when Matthew does follow Jesus, Matthew just says in 9, well, he got him and followed him.
Yeah.
Mark is the one that says, and he left everything.
Yeah, Mark tells more details about his life. Than
Matthew
himself
doesn't
does.
do that because it's admirable to leave everything in the Christian perspective. Matthew doesn't want that recognition when he writes about his call.
It's amazing.
So we should jump into Matthew 9.
All right, Matthew 9:9. That's where we're going to start.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's the call. So I'll read that for us. And as Jesus passed forth from thence, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the receipt of custom. And he saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. Reading from the King James Version, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm in the ESV, and I think before we get into this passage, it's important to talk about a little bit of the context of where we are.
Sure.
So we didn't read the beginning of Matthew 9, but at the beginning of Matthew 9, Jesus heals a paralytic, which is a shocking event, and he does that in a very well-known town, and that's Capernaum.
So that's a very interesting town. Most of the information or the scholarly information we have out there is that this was Jesus' home base.
Yep.
This was where Peter's home was located. And it's quite possible that the paralytic healing took place in Peter's house.
Yes, it is. Like you said, Matthew 9 gives reference to Jesus' own city. Jesus takes possessive in the language there. And then Mark, talking about the same story, labels it as Capernaum.
Yeah.
So we see Jesus taking ownership of that town, which he performs a lot of miracles in.
Yeah, and I think there is a kind of intentionality on Christ's part. And here's why I say that. Capernaum, again, because of some of the research I did here, is a very interesting place. It's a travel hub. So most people come through Capernaum to get to wherever else they wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so this would have been a very strategic place for the gospel to be spread.
It's the exit off the interstate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the exit off the interstate, which means that's where there's going to be food, there's going to be quick food, there's going to be lodging. And, this is the place that Peter grew up. So he grew up on the sea, right, or the lake, really.
Yeah.
He grows up fishing there. And because it is a main ferry area, get across the lake, and also fishing hub, it's a perfect place for tax collectors.
Exactly. That's where the money is.
That's where the money's at. And where the money is, that's where the taxes go.
Yeah. You know what I wonder when I think about this, the context that you're bringing out? I wonder if Peter might have interacted with Matthew prior to this moment.
I think it's highly possible. Like, do we know what the population of Capernaum would have been?
I don't. I did not look into those numbers.
I'll look into it.
Yeah. And I wonder the implications of that, right? Because if they met prior to Jesus, that would have meant that Peter was taxed by Matthew. And I could imagine the intense frustration between the two of them. It's like, bro, again. And when the Bible mentions here that he was found at the tax or the receipt of custom or the tax booth, it's talking about the fact that Matthew was most likely collecting ferry taxes.
Yep, ferry and fish.
Ferry and fish, which meant, if you're going to transport things or people across the lake, you had to pay tax to Matthew. And if you caught fish, you had to be taxed on that. And so everybody in Capernaum would have interacted with Matthew. And here's the interesting thing I discovered. Capernaum is a compound word.
Yes.
The city by itself, it's named Caper, which means city or village, and Nahum, which means comfort. So
Right, like the
here's
prophet.
so here's village of comfort, and the individual here is like a thorn, being Matthew, that causes a lot of discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely. I looked up that number in one of my Bible commentaries. The biblical population of Capernaum would have been, a conservative estimate would have been 1,000 people, and on the other end of the spectrum, 2,000. So it's a small
That's a small town. Yeah.
So probably not a lot of tax collectors in such a small area. But like you said, it's a hub. People travel through.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people stay, right? So Peter most likely would have recognized Matthew just from sight.
Yeah, because that's where his house was.
Yeah, it's where his mom lives.
And here's what I find interesting. Jesus just left, if we're right.
Yeah.
Just left Peter's house.
Yeah, very likely that's the case. But whether or not it was Peter's house, Jesus is making waves in Capernaum.
Yeah.
He's healing people. He's got a following now, and he makes a beeline towards a place nobody wants to go, which is very normal of Jesus. Like,
Yes.
what does he do? On Sabbath day, he goes to the place where the sick are.
Yes.
He goes to places people don't want to be and avoid at all costs. But
Yes.
that's where Jesus goes.
And he finds this guy at the tax booth.
And he sees a blank.
So what's interesting to me in Matthew 9:9, it says, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man.
Okay.
When you look at the accounts, right, between Mark and Luke, let me see if you can catch the difference.
Sure.
Mark says he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, in Mark 2:14.
Tribal name.
Luke 5:27, he saw a tax collector.
Profession.
So you have Luke, Jesus sees Matthew by his profession.
Yep.
Mark, Jesus sees Matthew by his family name.
Yep. His tribal impact.
Yes. And Matthew sees himself through the eyes of Jesus as a man.
That's it. Yeah.
I think that's powerful because for a tax collector, and I hope we get deeper into this because that was one of the most dehumanizing professions, right? I mean, people constantly dehumanize tax collectors, and we'll talk about some of those texts here. But when Matthew considers how Jesus saw him when he's now telling the story to you, myself, and those who read that book, he is like, it's highly dignifying for him to say he saw a man.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, if Jesus is obviously led by his Father, Jesus did everything purposefully and with intent. And so Jesus knows that, yes, he might just be looking at a man, but he's looking at a man that is discontented with what he's doing and looking for a man that is ready to answer a simple follow me. And link up with people that he has cheated in his past, Peter being one of them. And, you know, it's very interesting, Matthew. You talked about the profession of tax collectors. They were labeled as not just the outcasts of society, but when you see them in Scripture, they're associated in the same breath as prostitutes, right? You see them associated in the same breath as Gentiles, which for the Jewish psyche, that's even worse than a prostitute. You see they're political sellouts. When Romans are looking for tax collectors, they're looking for people that are so embarrassed already, they have nothing to lose. To take on this profession because they're going to be outcasts. They don't belong with the Romans because they're not Roman citizens, or at least they're trying to buy Roman citizenship. And they don't fit in with the Jews. They're people because they've sold out. So Matthew is a lonely person.
I kind of have a name for Matthew, or
Sure.
a phrase to describe him when I imagine and when I read this text. He, to me, is the most outside insider.
I like that.
It's sort of a contrast, right? Because at the same time, right, he's a nobody in the sense that he doesn't belong to the Romans, he doesn't belong to the Jews. But at the same time, when you look at the way he writes, you can tell that this brother is a is a scholarly biblical person. Like
It's very Pauline.
it's very Pauline. Like Matthew is highly biblical in this in his understanding. Like what
Yeah.
he writes, you kind of have to read a couple times to get what Matthew is trying to say. But he's also very prophetic
Yeah.
in terms of what he writes. Like if you to our listeners, if you ever read the book of Matthew and trace the word fulfilled throughout the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. Matthew was very familiar with the messianic prophecies, and he saw them taking place in the life of Jesus. And so from his memory, he was able to relocate those things and draw from that wealth of biblical knowledge. And that's not what you would expect of a tax collector. So for me, he is the most, inside outsider.
Yeah, I mean, he mentions the kingdom of heaven over 50 times.
Over 50 times. Yeah.
So he knows Jewish custom, but he also knows how the game is played with the Romans.
Yes.
So he's politically savvy, you could say. His position is one that you have to know what you're doing to get.
Yeah.
Because you have to not only buy it, but you have to bid to get it. And then once you get that position, then you immediately become one of the wealthiest people in that town.
Yeah.
But again, wealthy, but no one to share it with the exception of his coworkers.
Yeah. So interesting to me, right? And I realized when I just mentioned that I kind of flipped the script. I meant he's the most outside insider.
Sure.
But Mark 2, right?
Okay.
Mark 3 and verse 13. There's an important theological idea that I think we need to probably hone in on based on the conversation we're having here. And this is when Jesus calls the disciples and gives them, they're named, right? The same thing comes up in Mark 2:14 where Matthew is mentioned again as a tax collector. But here it mentions in verse 13 of Mark chapter 3, it says, and he goeth up into a mountain and he called to him those he wanted. I think that's an important theme for us to keep in mind. This is a very intentional choice on the part of Jesus to choose this person because he wants him. Why would Jesus want a tax collector on his team?
That's a big question. I think one of the reasons is to make some of the other disciples that he has uncomfortable.
God has a tendency to do that, doesn't he?
I mean, that's going to make Peter uncomfortable. It's going to make, and we're going to talk about him later, Simon the Zealot, extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at it just from like your reputation, Jesus eating with tax collectors has already cheapened his reputation in the eyes of his followers, especially the Pharisees.
Yeah.
And now that he's going to have one walking with him intimately, but Jesus doesn't care about that.
I wrestle with the implications of that, right? What you're saying. Like imagine having been unjustly treated by Matthew prior to this moment.
Oh, yeah.
And he's now a disciple.
I mean, yeah, I get it. I get it.
Like what kind of conversations? Like you almost want to find Jesus by himself to say, Lord, I don't. Well, I just don't know what inspiration is pulling you to, because we love our isolation, we love our echo chambers, we love our circles.
Yeah.
And when that's interrupted, it's like, no, there's something wrong happening here.
But you see with Matthew too, like when he joins the 12, Matthew's humble enough, he's humble enough to not only leave everything and follow Jesus immediately, but he's humble enough that as soon as he is called, he opens his home, which he's about ready to leave.
Yes.
And we need to continue Matthew 9 here, because it says in verse 10, right after it says that he followed him, Matthew 9:10, and as Jesus reclined at table in his house, this is Matthew's house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. So what does Matthew do when he's leaving everything? He throws a party in celebration that he's leaving all of his earthly possessions and reputations behind, good or bad. He throws a party for anybody that would enter his doors. And the only ones that enter Matthew's doors are
the tax collectors and
sinners.
But
it's what he's got. That's his sphere of influence.
Yeah, that's a circle. Interesting. That's an interesting point, right? Because what that makes me think of is where Jesus talks about the man who finds the pearl of great price, and sells everything he has.
It's Matthew, man.
That's Matthew, literally Matthew. Can you imagine like his entire life searching for meaning in things, and then he finally finds it in Christ.
Well, in contrast,
And he celebrates to get rid of it.
and that's in contrast to the rich young ruler. He's been living his whole life looking for meaning, and he comes to Jesus and says, I haven't found it. How can I be saved? And Jesus says, well,
Sell everything you have.
give up all you have.
Yeah.
And not only will he not do that, but he won't give anything.
Nothing.
And so he walks away not with celebration, but in despair, and holds everything that he's got. Matthew is the complete opposite of the rich young ruler, not just in profession, not just in reputation, but also the answer to Jesus' call and the reaction to such sacrifice.
So, man, that's a fascinating point. I didn't think about it that way. Because what I'm hearing you say, and this is what I'm wrestling with here, is the brother was so happy to part ways with it.
Yeah.
That he threw a party when Jesus said, hey, come.
I love it.
What that makes me think of, when you see someone on the, behind the glass walls of their mansion, you begin to think they're happy there. Like that's their joy. Like they're successful, nothing to worry about. And some of us, we feel intimidated to share Jesus with them because of the cost that might be associated with. They have no need. Yeah, exactly. But Matthew's like, I've been waiting for this moment.
Yep.
Here's the key. Here's the cash.
Take it all.
Take it all. I just want Jesus. Yeah.
And Matthew's even humble enough that he doesn't even hold the money in the disciples. He's like, no, Judas can do that. I might be the expert, but I'm not even going to touch the money aspect.
Wild. That is wild. He parted 100% with the cash, and Judas was robbing it.
Yeah, he didn't want anything to do with an audit. Yeah. He didn't want anything to do with that. So, yeah, it's a good point. Like, so often when Jesus asks us to give up something, and even when it's something that's,
we don't celebrate.
That's
we
hurting
mourn.
us.
We mourn, bro.
Yeah, we mourn giving up the thing that's killing us.
Yeah.
And we should learn from Matthew here, because Matthew celebrates giving up his side of the coin.
Yeah.
But then he flips it, because on the other side of the coin, like we've been talking about, some pretty exciting stuff that's coming his way.
Can I mention one more point on this,
Yeah,
and then we
please.
can move on? Matthew's name. I'm always fascinated by names of places and names of people.
Yeah.
His name literally means gift of Yahweh or gift of God. Interesting to me. Everything he owned, he gave up. Right?
Yep.
And to me, at least what I see here is that Matthew, when I think about his life story, he's a gift that has now been reclaimed. And the reason why I think of that, I can imagine, like in his Jewish context, which we haven't necessarily talked about, his parents, perhaps his friends, his churches, church,
synagogue,
brethren, and all that stuff, they would have told him, Matthew, you're wasting your gift. Dealing with the Romans, it's a religious treasonous act.
Sold his soul.
He sold his soul. You're wasting your gift, and Jesus comes, and instead of ostracizing him, say, "You're my gift."
Yeah, Matthew is a servant of the oppressor.
Yeah,
sold his soul, like we said. But yeah, Jesus sees past that, and if you sold your soul to somebody, someone's got to buy it back.
Yeah.
Right?
Jesus bought it.
And Jesus buys him back in a beautiful way. But, just looking at, you've probably heard it said before, there's two things that are sure in life, and it's death and taxes. Nobody likes to pay taxes.
No one, yeah.
We all complain about paying taxes. And I don't want to talk too loudly about it, but dude, it's crazy that you have to file your taxes, and they know how much that you have to pay, but they're not going to tell you how much you have to pay. You got to figure out for yourself how much you got to pay. And if it doesn't match their number, you go to prison, right?
Yeah.
So, and we look at that as borderline theft, which I would argue probably is. And then on the next level, you've got Roman taxes. And, the taxes that we're paying today is a whole lot more than what our founding fathers were bargaining for. Not to go on a political rant here. I mean, they threw a fit for paying a couple cents on tea. And now what are we paying taxes on? We got tolls, we have, income tax, we have state tax, we have property tax, we have food tax. We've got, so many taxes. The Romans were doing this even more so than what we have today. So much so that they could tell you if you were on the side of the road, hey, carry this for me for a mile. And Jesus talks about that. If a Roman tells you to do that, carry it for him twice. 2 miles, right? But Matthew is in the enforcement mode of this oppressive system, and people hate that oppression. And not only that, but they also have to pay taxes to the temple, right? So you've got temple tax, you've got Roman tax. The Roman tax is being abused, but at the same time, the ones that are in the church are also abusing the money that they're getting.
You can't escape.
The high priest is robbing people left and right, with prices of sacrifices. You know, they have a different currency in the temple that you have to exchange, and the exchange rates are crazy high. So, you know, Matthew, what I'm trying to say here is Matthew is an oppressor, but he isn't too far off from the religious leaders of the day either.
Yeah.
Because they're stealing from the purses of those around them. The high priest, his role is bought from the Romans. We know that from history as well as spirit of prophecy. Matthew's role is bought from the Romans. It's just the religious leaders hide it a little bit better.
You know what that makes me think of? It's like, you know, when you come from the world and you come into the church and you see the practices of the world.
It's
for someone who's coming from out there, you're like, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And I know how that goes down. But for the religious, they pretend often that, no, that's not what you're seeing.
Yeah, this is different. This is different how we do it here. There's a reason why. Yeah, that's a great point. Like, imagine Matthew going to the temple and getting ripped off. He's like, I see your game. I know what you're doing.
Game recognizes game. It's like,
that's how I built my empire, Matthew says.
I gave all of that up, and now I see. Because I hear this conversation sometimes, you know, like for someone who comes from the music background, for example, and they hear certain kinds of music in church, and it's like, and that kind of rubs me the wrong way. And it's like, no, but it's different, you know? No, I know what I heard out there, right? Mm-hmm. Or again, the handling of finances in this case for Matthew is like, I see what's happening. You're taking advantage of a system. Do we have any biblical examples of that? I think we had discussed one earlier, and I think it had to do with Peter and the fish. Do you remember this one? Yeah,
so this was interesting. We were talking about this off air as we were kind of mapping out where we're going. It's later on in, what do you know? It's in Matthew, because Matthew is a tax collector. And so, of course, it's going to be interesting to him when you get to
the temple,
right? So it says here, I believe, let me find it. I think it's Matthew 17. Where is it? Yeah, Matthew 17:24. What do you know? This is a while later. And where are they again? Capernaum.
Back at Capernaum, yeah.
So the place that Matthew has left his tax booth, now they're back in Peter's town. And it's no wonder that Peter gets approached, because it's his hometown, right?
Yeah.
So Matthew 17:24, when they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter. So we'll pause there. What is this?
That's the temple tax.
So these aren't Roman tax collectors.
Nope, that's separate from Roman taxes, which usually doesn't associate with the drachma. So here you have the temple taxes. So these are religious officials that come to Peter, and they're asking a question of Jesus, like, does your master pay taxes for the temple? Which had to do with the maintenance.
Yep.
That's
combined budget.
Kind of like saying combined budget. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yep.
Do you pay into the church to maintain?
Yeah, and the Mishnah said that there was a certain amount. It was a couple denarii, I think. Every Jewish man of a certain age had to give X amount every year.
Yeah.
And so that these guys are saying, did Jesus pay his dues to temple tax, or does he not pay at all? And Peter's the representative that they ask, probably because it would have seemed, you know, culturally kind of in distaste to ask a rabbi something to do with money publicly. And so they kind of go to a representative, and because it's Peter's hometown, probably why they approached Peter. But anyway.
Before you continue, I have an interesting anecdote on that. Did you know that the tax collector's money could not be used to pay the drachma?
I did not. Well, yeah, because it was Roman money.
Yeah. So here's, this is from the Bava Kama. This is one of the Jewish writings. It says, no money may be taken in change, either from the box of the customs collectors or from the purse of the tax collectors, nor may charity be taken from them, though it may be taken from their own coins, which they have at home or in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
They played a zero-sum game with the tax collectors. Like, we don't want your money.
Yeah.
not even a brick. I'm not going to allow you to contribute towards this.
It's blood money.
It's blood money, essentially. So it's interesting that they raised this question in the presence of Matthew.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, go ahead. I just thought
that's a
that was
really
an
great
interesting insight there. But go ahead.
Yeah. So it continues and says 25. Peter says, "Yeah." And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon? Who do the kings of the earth take toll or tax, from their sons or from others?" He said, "From others." So Jesus' question is, so if there's a king and he taxes people, he doesn't tax his kids.
No.
He taxes the citizens he has no intimate relationship with.
Yeah.
What's Jesus doing in asking that question?
Well, he's saying my father owns the temple. Like my father is the king. I'm his son. It's like, what are you asking about?
Yeah, exactly.
That's like, like asking God if he paid tithe this morning.
Exactly. But, it's important because I'm a man right now.
Yes.
So go do what you do best and throw in a line, and there'll be the tax.
Okay, point on that. I think that's important to emphasize, right? Because Jesus was saying, I'm exempt from this.
He is.
But yet still, he participates in the process.
It's an amazing point.
I think a lot of times when it comes to money and church, there's a trend, right? More common now than ever.
Sure.
For people to think that the moment you're exchanging finances with someone in either a leadership or religious, religious setting or context, that somehow I think we reason through that through distrust. Like I'm being robbed, or I see the imagery of the tax collector or this person that's trying to abuse the situation when it comes to talking with Jesus. Why do we think that way?
It's a good question. Whenever we talk about money, people get uptight.
That's very true.
And I think one of the reasons that we get uptight with money is when you think about what money is at its basis, most of us have to give time for money, right? We work for money. Yeah. So in essence, we're exchanging part of our life that we'll never get back for monetary value. So when you are giving something that you have worked for to somebody else or an organization or something else, what you're in essence doing is giving away part of your life that you will never get back. And I think whether we realize it psychologically or not, one of the reasons we get so uptight when we talk about money is because that's where money comes from for most of us. It comes from sacrifice. And when we give to an organization, when we give to a church, we give to a charity. I remember I used to give to a charity called Wounded Warriors. You probably see it on like Under Armour logos and things like
veterans,
that.
Right?
Yeah, veterans. Yeah. And it was a great organization, but then it came out that the CEO of that organization was making millions and millions of dollars every year, and pennies on the dollar were going to actually help wounded warriors.
That's crazy.
And so, somebody that had given money to that organization now feels cheated.
Yeah, you felt betrayed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you see that in the political realm as well. But when it happens we expect it out there, right?
Yeah.
Like we expect that when we pay our tax, it's going to get...
The roads are going to get fixed.
We hope, but we also know it's going to get misused.
Yes, yeah.
We know it's going to get misused. When we donate money to a different organization, it might not go where it's intended. But when we give money to church, we expect it's going to be used appropriately.
I wonder if what you just shared, and this is probably my pushback here on that, I wonder if that's more of a secular philosophy.
It is.
Yeah, to think that, I'm giving a part of you work to earn the money, so there's a sacrifice.
It's absolutely
so
secular.
It becomes a part of you, right?
Yep.
That's secular philosophy.
It is, 100%.
And I think a lot of people have bought into that idea.
Absolutely.
God flips that on its head.
Yes, he
and
does.
says, I own everything.
What you get is a gift.
Exactly. Which is so fascinating to me because, again, the whole story of Matthew is highlighting that theme of gift. Matthew, the gift of God. Here we have something that is crazy that's about to happen in the story. We do need to finish this. Jesus tells Peter to go to the lake.
Yep.
And he's like, go ahead, fish, catch.
That's what you do, Peter.
Yeah, that's what you do for a living. Catch the first fish that comes up and open its mouth and you'll see a coin in the mouth of that fish and used that to pay the taxes. So interestingly, for me, what I see is Jesus working a miracle to cover the expense that he didn't have to.
Yeah.
Which is just, so again, the participation of Jesus on this
Still complies.
is he still complies. And I think for us, we would have argued our way out of that.
Oh, yeah. And rightly so. Just like baptism, Jesus didn't have to get baptized, but he does it anyway. Jesus doesn't pay temple tax, doesn't have to, but he does it anyway.
Yeah. Do you think there was even a thought in Jesus' mind that they're going to misuse that coin?
Oh, he knows it's going to happen.
But he still pays it, doesn't he?
I mean, Jesus still attends Passover every year, and he
he's
knows
the
that it's
lamb.
a shambles.
Yeah.
It's shambles, man.
It's amazing.
But he goes anyway. So not to say that we shouldn't challenge when authority is used. Like there needs to be a challenge of authority being abused. But Matthew here comes from the ultimate authority being abused, and he's following after the peacemaker. It very much reminds me of, and this is not a slip of the tongue, it reminds me a little bit of Moses. I know, I'm going back.
Yeah.
No, think about it.
Oh, yeah. I get
Moses
I get
leaves
what you're
riches
going.
and gives it all away. He doesn't really throw a party necessarily. But you find time and time again, you see this with the brilliance of Matthew. Matthew makes it very clear that when Jesus is giving his Sermon on the Mount, he puts in the right verbiage for the Jewish people to realize that this is the second Moses that is giving the law.
The theme of Moses is there.
Yeah, right. And he's reinterpreting the Ten Commandments and giving not just the law, but the letter of the law, which, by the way, there's one to do with taxes.
That's the one I was thinking about. This is Matthew 5.
Yep, Sermon on the Mount.
Verse 46. It says here, for if you love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans or tax collectors the same?
Yep.
You know what I wonder? Because Matthew is writing this, right? So he's writing the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, he makes sure it's in there.
Yeah, like how would that hit? Like when you're, I know this has happened to you as well. It has happened to me many times where like you preach a sermon and someone comes and like, Pastor, like, why are you telling the world my business? Like God gave you something for me. Like you kind of get that sense. But imagine Jesus talking, bro. Mm-hmm. You know where you come from. Mm-hmm. You're a tax collector. You were a tax collector up to this point.
Yeah.
And Jesus changed your life. And now he begins to speak his Sermon on the Mount. You hear him preach. And it's like, don't the tax collectors love each other, right? And Jesus is using this by contrast. In other words, the worst of the worst loves themselves. Mm-hmm. To do that is a very low bar. Mm-hmm. Love your enemies, It's like don't just love your friends, love your enemies too. It's like for Matthew, it's like,
Yep, Matthew knows that where he came from, and he always labels himself as, well, that tax collector, that old tax collector.
Yeah, like what must have gone through his mind when he wrote that?
Or later on, when Jesus was challenged, hey, do you pay tax? Like not just the temple tax, but the Romans come up and they're like, hey, the whole tax thing. And Jesus says, give to Caesar's what's Caesar's. Matthew's in that audience.
Yeah.
And it's Matthew that writes about that too, later in his narrative as well, which it looks like you're looking that up.
No, I'm looking up a different one. This one is also fascinating, which I think would have hit really hard too.
Yeah.
The prayer of the tax collector in the synagogue.
Bro, yeah. Beating on his chest.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
Like how must this have registered in Matthew's mind? It goes on. So Luke 18, that's where we are. And it says, and he spoke a parable unto certain who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee, the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I'm not like other men. I'm not an extortioner, unjust, adulterer, or even like this tax collector.
Yep.
So here is and we talked about this earlier, and our listeners can read the rest. We talked about this earlier. Like now, Jesus finally puts those two groups against one another.
Yep.
And the valuation actually doesn't end where you think it will.
Mm-mm.
The publican is seemingly righteous, the Pharisee.
Yep.
And just like he's praying with himself and he's like, God, I thank you that I'm not like tax collectors or other people in that list.
Yep.
And then just like, look at the tax collector though.
Mm-hmm. He's sincere.
He's sincere. He's humble. He's just there beating his chest saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And man, that must have, that's the kind of thing where you get goosebumps, like there's hope for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because in Luke, this narrative, it's just a few verses later where you have the rich young ruler.
Yes.
And then it's the next chapter. It's Zacchaeus.
The chief tax collector,
Yeah,
Mr.
the man.
Zacchaeus, the man.
Yeah.
I wonder if he and Matthew had meetings.
Yeah, you do wonder, like if they met at conferences or anything like that. But we do recognize that Zacchaeus does the exact same thing that Matthew does.
Yeah.
When he recognizes he needs to make things right, he throws a party.
He does.
And says, I'm giving it all away.
Yes.
He does the exact same thing Matthew did before. So you wonder, was there an example that was set by Matthew here for Zacchaeus? Because Jericho, Capernaum is an important town, but Jericho is like the town.
Well, in my mind, I would be like, Jericho is more like the Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Like California.
Yeah, totally. And taxes are
Capernaum,
higher there.
Capernaum might have been Atlanta.
That's a pretty massive airport. Bro, taxes in California, you've seen the taxes out there?
Dude, it's wild, man.
Dude, I don't know if you saw it, but like last Super Bowl, the quarterback, it was Jared Goff. He played and he lost money playing in California.
Really?
He had to pay more taxes on what he made than what he made. He left with like a $200,000 bill.
Well, I think my comparisons work then.
I think they work. But I love what Jesus says at the end of Zacchaeus. Today, salvation has come to this house.
Yeah.
And you are a son of Abraham.
Yeah.
So remember who you are.
Yeah.
Right? You're not just by your profession. You're known as child of God.
Which, by the way, son of Abraham was a title the Jews would have stripped Zacchaeus of.
Yeah.
And the same Matthew. Right?
He would have wanted that.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have had it.
Yeah. But Jesus
Restores it.
Jesus. No, he was never gone. Jesus just reaffirms what was already there.
That's a fact.
It's like,
yeah, that's true.
Son of Abraham is like, wow. But again, like, can you imagine, like you had mentioned earlier, we were wondering if whether, Matthew had set the precedence for Zacchaeus.
Yeah, who knows?
I think it's quite possible, right? Because Zacchaeus was hunting Jesus down, right? This is the brother that climbed the tree to see, Jesus passing by. Like, I wonder if Matthew might have given him hope. Like, there's a guy by the name of Matthew who was a former tax collector, and Jesus forgave him all of his sins, and there's hope, there's salvation. To remove salvation and genealogy from a Jew is a death sentence.
Yeah, it's who they are.
And that's what they did. That's what the Pharisees, the scribes did to all these guys. And so I could see Zacchaeus thinking, oh, there's hope for me because there's a man like Matthew who is now in the in-group.
I'm running to see Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting because Jesus sought Matthew out. And then a few months later, Zacchaeus seeks Jesus out, and Matthew finds himself in a chief tax collector's house, eating of another tax collector's food that's not his own.
He attended another party.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the mansion anymore. He doesn't have the funds to throw that kind of a party anymore. But he sees one of his coworkers being restored, which is super beautiful.
Yeah. The thought of a wealthy man giving up everything to be completely dependent on a guy who has nowhere to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's not the wisdom of the world.
Mm-mm.
That's not. That something divine took place there to change this guy's life.
Yeah, and Matthew was one of the few disciples that had something to give up. You know what I mean? Like, Peter still had his house, but it was because his mom was there. Luke probably had some money, but, the rest of the disciples are kind of, the blue-collar mentality, probably the lower escalons of Judaism. But Matthew is probably one of, if not the wealthiest of all of them. and he has the most to give up, and he gives it all.
All for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we go next?
Well, there's a lot we can go. I don't know how we're doing on time.
We're about 15.
We have 15 minutes left.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not bad. Well, we can talk a little bit about what Matthew does with the rest of his life, but there's more I want to get to before we get to that part.
All right, let's keep going then.
Yeah, let's keep going with Matthew. Do we want to talk about how Matthew deals with, like when you think of Matthew, what chapter comes to mind?
Chapter of Matthew?
Yeah, when you think Matthew, what chapter comes to mind like immediately for you?
5.
Matthew, okay. Sermon on the
4,
Mount.
4 and 5.
Okay.
Temptation, Sermon on the Mount.
Temptation, Sermon on the Mount. I go to Matthew 24.
24. Well, yes. That too.
Matthew 25, Parable of the 10 Virgins, because you were talking about the prophetic voice
Yes.
of Matthew. And so we see, he spends the first part of his book talking about Jesus' origins. He talks about, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus and his messages. Matthew gives us the most uninterrupted monologues of Jesus in the Gospels. So that's pretty phenomenal. But then you see Matthew listed, I think, for the last time in Acts chapter 1, if you want to go there. Acts 1, we find him in the upper room, I think it is. Acts 1:13 says, well, I'll start in 12. It says, then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away. And when they had entered, they went up to the upper room where they were staying, Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, and Matthew. James, the son of Alphaeus, and it goes on there.
Simon Zelotes.
Yep, Simon Zelotes, which we're going to be touching.
Yeah.
And then it says in verse 14, all were of one accord. They were waiting for the Holy Spirit.
Now, that is some miracle. All in one accord.
Yeah.
Tax collector with the text.
Tax collectors with the tax, two people groups that have very differing political beliefs. In the context of Acts chapter 1:12, not only are they waiting for the Holy Spirit, but they're picking Judas' successor, who's going to take his place, whose name happened to be Matthew himself.
Yeah.
But they've been betrayed. They've just seen the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, and now he's ascended, and Matthew's still around. And despite all of that, his jaw is set on continuing this gospel message with his buddies, with his disciples, with his friends.
Yeah. But here's the other thing too. I think sometimes when we look at Acts 1, that verse we just read, we think that the disciples have arrived to a place of perfection, and that's what makes them unified.
That ain't it.
But yeah, when you look at Matthew 28, again, Matthew.
Yeah.
I love the fact that Matthew does not spare any details, right, throughout his writing.
Yeah.
Right? He's very detail-oriented. Now, look at what he says here. This is after Jesus had been resurrected and before he gave the commission. So verse 16, it says, then the 11 disciples, again, Judas being gone, went away into Galilee, into a mountain where Jesus had appointed them. And so, in other words, they cycle back to what we read in Mark 3.
Yep.
The very same spot that Jesus called them, so they were there.
So cool.
And then it says, and when they saw him, meaning Jesus, they worshiped him, but some doubted.
Mm-hmm.
So in Acts 1, again, this is not long after this experience.
Right.
In Acts 1, you find in this group, there are still some who doubted.
Yeah.
They were worshiping a resurrected Christ, and yet still some of them doubted. So I imagine, and this is why I said initially when you read that verse, this is some miracle, right? Because not only are they philosophically on a different page,
they're not on one accord
socially on a different page, economically probably closer now, but past tense, not on the same page. There's
different tiers.
Lineage-wise, so many things, education, like you could go down the list, and yet still, Jesus accomplished the miracle of making them one.
Yeah, and I think that's a misconception. Like when I think you're highlighting it well when we look at the book of Acts, and I use the term loosely, but I feel like we think that the disciples reached this state of like nirvana,
Oh yeah.
where they're like, oh man, every thought that they thought was the same. And like they had no disagreements. And they just like, it was just kumbaya all
Oh
the
yeah.
time.
Church was perfect.
And that's why the Holy Spirit was allowed to come, was because every thought was the same. That's not the case.
Nope, that's not what's going on.
We see it with Paul and Peter later. I
Yeah.
mean, they go at it.
Yeah.
Peter's got some bigotry he's still dealing with.
Paul and Mark as well.
Dude, yeah. So there is, in and of the disciples themselves, because we know what happened with them later in Acts, they're not of one accord philosophically, as you just said. They've got stuff that they're working with too. So if they're not of one accord philosophically, why does the Bible say they're of one accord? What does it mean?
Missionally.
Yeah, that's it.
So I think, and this is what I think is so powerful, right? And I think this is a law of human nature. When we're internally focused, that is when disunity arrives.
Dude, that's when churches fall apart.
Dude, I mean, we that's
Bro.
a fact. That's a
If
fact.
churches aren't,
If you in the pew becomes a selfish individual,
yeah,
you are going to be a cancer in that church environment.
and it's not a matter of if, it's when.
It's when, because you're going to go off.
It's-
Right? It's just going to be the case. And so when we're not missionally focused, right, meaning off the self and now onto God's mission, right? Jesus had told them, go into all the world, preach the gospel. That was the mission. The motivation was, I have all power. Go. So just go. Your business is to go. I have everything you need. And in the going, the unity begins to be the experience.
And that's
As long as we are continually sitting and focused on ourselves, when church becomes
consumer.
consumer, yes, but when it becomes a Sabbath morning fill
Yeah,
or an entertainment experience,
consumer.
the consumer, then you know for sure you're not going to be a part of that body being unified.
And we use the church because we're pastors, but husbands and wives,
Same.
if you aren't self-sacrificial towards each other or for those around you or for your kids, the same thing will happen to you. As a family, if you've got kids, or maybe you're a kid and you're a part of the family, if your family is not mission-oriented, then your family is going to be disunified and has a real danger of falling apart. The Christians, and we just highlighted it, the Christians' magic bullet, the secret sauce is mission orientation. It's focused on the word go.
That's right.
Jesus said, follow me. And then later he said, go.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, it's the same
Yeah.
thing. So toxic churches, answer, go. Toxic family, answer, go. Toxic marriage, answer, focus on someone other than yourself.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because for Matthew, that's what he did.
Absolutely. And rejoiced.
Yeah. And he's the brother, before he went, he had a party to part ways with everything he had.
Yeah, man.
Like
It was weighing him down.
it was weighing him down. Here's what I thought about when you just mentioned some of those things there for the family as well as the church environment.
yeah.
I think about Philippians 2, verse 5, where the Apostle Paul says, let this mind be in you,
That's it.
which is also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made, and this is where I think about Matthew, but made himself of no reputation and took upon himself the form of a servant.
Go.
Go. I love this because, I think, and I love the fact that Paul used the word let, right? That word let means to allow,
Yeah. Submit.
right? Constantly, we're resisting that way of thinking, in other words, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Christ has a way that he looks at the world and he's like, let me process for you.
Please. Please.
Because as Jesus is walking and you see Matthew's like, your mind is like, no way, not a part of this group. He's one of the outsiders. We don't want him here. And just like, if you let my mind process this, I'll show you something unique you've never seen before. And
Absolutely.
so Matthew now becomes part of the group. And it's like, bro, you thought you'd never agree. Look at you now.
So one accord.
One accord.
One accord is missional. It's go. And Matthew, from what we know historically, this isn't written in the Bible, but it's not legend. It's a little bit more backed up than that. But what we know from history is that Matthew spends some time in Jerusalem, probably a decade or so, talking with the Hebrews and the Jews and doing work there. And then from there, he goes to northern Africa. He goes to Egypt. He spends some time in Ethiopia as well, establishes the Christian church there, which was very influential.
He kept going
in the first century after Jesus. So we don't know exactly how Matthew died. Some say that he was stabbed. Others say he died peacefully. We don't really know about
there's
that.
not a lot of sources.
There's not a lot there. But what we do know is he served till the end.
Yeah.
He went.
I have an interesting anecdote that I failed to mention, and I think it's important since we kind of get into the historical piece.
Yeah,
now.
sure. Just ending on the history.
So one of the church fathers, I think it was Clement of Alexandria.
Yeah.
There's no way to prove this, but there's an interesting point that he makes that Matthew most likely was vegetarian.
That's so weird.
I found that interesting in my research. I'm like, vegetarian. So what's fascinating about this to me is that Matthew is very close to Adventism.
Yeah. And like you said, when we look at the church history stuff, we recognize it's not scriptural. So
Correct.
you can't say without the shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But history does exist for a reason. So it's likely that a lot of this did happen, but you can't just trust it blindly.
I just thought it was an interesting
cool.
point. But yeah, not to be taken as gospel truth. But at the same time, the important thing here is not who Matthew was. And if Matthew were sitting across from us having this conversation, he would tell us, it's not who I am, right? He is self-deprecating.
Yeah.
I'm just a tax collector, man. I came into this thing, but let me tell you about who really matters. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what keeps him going. I'll go to Africa. Why? Jesus.
I'll get along with Simon the Zealot.
Jesus.
Which, by the way, we talked about that being comparison for next episode. And that's going to be the next episode that we release because you have Matthew, who is a sellout to the Romans.
Yeah.
He's a fan of high taxes. He's a fan of big government. He's a fan of big military. And then you've got Simon on the complete other end of the spectrum.
Simon is the kind of individual that's ready to burn it all down.
Oh, yeah.
Right? As a zealot, he wants to tear the system.
He's a revolutionary.
He's a revolutionary. He's a rebel. He's okay prior to Jesus with taking the lives of the oppressors. There's so much more. So on the political spectrum, which is, sort of what you were, mentioning there, I would imagine, I don't know what your thoughts would be, Matthew seemed more right, and Simon probably would have been more left.
Yeah. I would honestly think the other way.
Do you? Really?
I think Matthew's
Simon more right?
Matthew, I think, is more left because, high tax, big government.
Maybe that. I just thought on the social piece.
Socially, I could see that.
Yeah, but maybe they flip on certain aspects.
Who knows? But they're different.
Yeah. Which, by the way, there's not much of a difference between the political parties. But anyway.
That's a fact.
But yeah, so you have these
two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah, two sides of the same coin. Exactly.
What we've been talking about.
Exactly. So it's interesting, right? So the dialogue that you're referring to that's coming up next is we're going to try to focus on that angle. How would those two potentially get along? And what might be some of the challenges that they would face as they interact with each other? The zealot and the sellout.
And we've got people in our Christian faith that have views politically that are very opposing. And we're not going to be on the same page, and we're not going to be unified on those things. But the question is, do we have to be?
No. And here's why. Politics is not the winning message.
It's go.
If you are seeking to win somebody to your political side, you're on the wrong mission.
Yeah, that ain't Jesus.
No, certainly not. You're off point, man. Just go sit down. Until, I think there needs to be a reframing of what our responsibilities and our duties are. Politics, there's no salvation in it. You can talk about whoever is in the White House all you want.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's not a saving message.
No. And if we get so focused on those things that it becomes an issue in our church, it is a sign that we are not focused on what matters.
Yeah.
We have too much time on our hands.
Most likely we're focused on us.
Yeah, 100%.
Lower taxes.
Dude.
gas price.
Killer.
Anyway,
It's
we could
killer,
keep going
though.
for a long time.
Anyway, $5. Good
Yeah, it's a
grief.
lot. We both agree.
Well, you drove here today.
I did. I felt it. 2.5 hours. But at the same time, for me, the message was still the same. Go. We had to get this message out.
Yeah.
So, Garrett, this is the end of our discussion on the life of Matthew.
Looking forward to Simon.
Yes, we have to pick up the other side of the coin. So we're going to flip the coin
Yes.
in the next episode. And we're grateful for our listeners. Thank you for bearing with us. And we hope that this episode was a blessing for you.
So like always, I'm Garrett.
And I'm Jermaine. Thank you for tuning into God Inc.
See you later.